Okay, excellent. There we go. We are live with the one only great and powerful Mike Doehla from StrongerU Nutrition. Mike, thank you so much for coming on board today, man. I'm really excited to do this.
What's up, James? How are you? Thanks for calling me powerful. I appreciate that. I used
You're
to be a
welcome.
lot stronger than I am today, but that's
It's
okay.
okay.
Life has changed a little bit.
Yeah, those priorities take some major shifts when you start running
Yep,
your own
yep.
business and then you start a family and it's like, oh, I'm no longer 23 and just go to the gym for 90 minutes a day and don't really have any other real life concerns. That was
Yeah,
a good
right.
time though. I
It's a
did
different
enjoy that.
world.
That was a fun period.
Yeah, exactly. Like 7 days a week, just lifting to get strong and, a couple injuries along the way. Now I'm just trying to stay as healthy as I can.
That's just the natural shift, the progression that things take. But let's do this. So anybody who listening who may not know who you are, can we give them the quick rundown on who you are, what you do, maybe a quick synopsis on StrongerU Nutrition, and then we'll just
Yeah.
dive right in because we started to have a pretty good conversation off air, and we'll just bring that right back.
Yeah, so this is I could give you like a 30-minute story or I could give you like a 3-minute story. So I'll try to do the 3-minute story. Basically, normal everyday guy working in banking and human resources, didn't love my career, wanted to work in the fitness industry, which was what my passion was. Tried to start a small little CrossFit garage gym, didn't work out, no one cared to train with me in my cold, dirty garage. So I pivoted to online nutrition all while working. Did that for 13 months, got a ton of clients by creating a system that I thought was the missing piece in the nutrition space. People were doing flexible dieting and things like that, but they didn't mix the community and the education and all the data. And that's what we do at StrongerU. We try to identify what people's problem areas with food are and then plug in solutions for those things. So in about 7 years, we became one of America's fastest growing companies on the Inc. 5000 list, strictly through word of mouth, which I'm extremely proud of because, as we all know, in this industry, a lot of people are selling lots of nonsense. And we didn't have to do that to grow and help lots of people. And now we're a team of about 90 people, registered dietitians, PhDs, certified coaches. There's salespeople. There's everything you can imagine on our team. Recently, we were acquired by Self-Esteem Brands, the parent company of Anytime Fitness. And the big reason I did that was it sounds weird to like have a successful business and sell, but I just want to help more people. Like I'm okay financially. I wanted to be, I don't care about being like the CEO and big dog at a business. I want to just help as many people as humanly possible. And this allows us to do that. So that's kind of my quick story. Just had a baby. That's been awesome. So life is good. I just want to spread the joy to everyone else.
I love it, man. Just crushing it on all fronts. It's funny. My first job was actually in banking. I was
Yeah.
an economics, political science undergrad and took my first job at Bank of America. And I worked there for one day. On the train ride home from the bank, I remember calling my dad. I was like, hey, just a heads up, this is not going to work. I'm not going to quit right now, but I'm going to figure out an exit plan because
Yep.
I can't do this. Like, this is not going to fly. And I was very much like you, where my passion was strength and conditioning, exercise physiology, performance. I just didn't really study that in school.
Yeah.
So it took a roundabout way of eventually getting to where I am now, going back to school, doing a bunch of internships, all that fun jazz. But then very much in the similar position of, I don't really care if anybody knows who I am. Like, I honestly would prefer to just kind of be a silent assassin in the background. I don't need anybody to know my name, right? Like, role
Yeah, I kind of miss
performance.
those days.
Yeah.
Like
What
before
we're
like
doing.
fitness professionals knew of me. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like I'd be totally fine if no one ever knew my name and they were just like, "Oh, well, Rebel Performance does this. That's great. They're helping people. Awesome." Like
Yep.
I'll just go live on a farm and do my thing, and yeah, no one needs to know who I am. But
Yeah, I see it's tough for me. Like I go in like ebbs and flows. I'm like, oh, it's cool if people know you because they're probably getting some value from what you're putting out into the world. But then there's days I'm like, I just kind of want to fade off of social media at times. But I'm like, man, that's where I help people. Because
Yep.
I'm not just going to run down the streets giving fat loss advice, That's kind of awkward.
Just run down the middle of the road, just throwing out like note cards and sticky notes,
Yeah.
like here,
Oh, you
fat
care
loss
about
tips
that
for everybody.
decision?
So the topic that I want to start with today that we had a little bit of a chat about is just helping people become better eaters. And I think that's really what lies at the core of what you guys are doing at Stronger You. And part of the reason you've been so successful is that the approach that you take, right? Because the challenge is having people be aware, this self-awareness around nutrition, and not getting lost in the minutia and having debates about things that probably honestly just don't really matter that much.
Yeah. That's pretty much it. It's when I think of a problem in life in general, I always try to think about what is causing this thing and what needs to happen for it to not happen anymore. And for most of our members, it's fat loss. For some of them, it's athletic performance and muscle gain and things like that. But the big problem, I think, in the field of nutrition is how to lose fat. So people don't understand exactly how it happens or why it happens. They don't understand the causes of what's going on. They design a life that makes it incredibly hard to do well accidentally. They're even afraid, like, is this nutrition advice? But telling someone, hey, I know your husband is sabotaging all your efforts. Have you tried to talk to him about it? And that's like things that a lot of other plans aren't doing. They're like, I don't want to get involved. And it's like, you're not starting arguments in a household. But if someone is trying to do better and their partner is sabotaging them, they have to have these conversations. So that's what I like about this nutrition stuff is really trying to be like a food detective and seeing what the actual problem is and how do we create solutions for those things. And as taboo as it is, it's almost like life coaching around food. Mm-hmm. You're not just telling people, hey, you have to eat this number of calories with protein, fat, and carb, whatever, eat at this time. Like some of that is very important. And the macro stuff for me and the flexible approach is really the foundation for a lot of people because it forces education and awareness. And that's my big thing with it. It's not that everyone needs to track everything forever. It's that the problem is you have no idea what you're eating, even if you think you do. So track it for a bit and get the reality, even if it sucks for a little bit.
Mm-hmm. People don't like simple for some reason. Everybody feels like there has to be a complex solution for a problem, when in reality, most problems have a very simple solution. But I don't know what it is about us as human beings that seeks out the most complex, convoluted way of trying to solve a problem, right? Because
I think I know what it is with food, right?
Maybe simple is just not sexy.
Yes, and we've been groomed to think that if it's that simple, it's too good to be true. But it's like with food, it literally is. The problem is we eat too many calories and we don't burn enough. I'm not saying starve yourself and work out all day long. I'm saying maybe you just need to snack a little bit less and maybe you need to go for some walks. Mm-hmm. And that might be some people's solution.
Yeah, I think those small changes, that's where the rubber actually meets the road, right? It's not finding some fancy new supplement. It's just people don't want to hear the fact that, oh, like maybe you should go for an extra walk in the afternoon, right? Like that may be your really solution, right? Because one of the things I really like about what Stronger You and the coaches that I know, they're like Dean and Jeb and Snag and all these awesome people, right? What's great is that you're not doing what a lot of people on the internet are doing, which is just this starvation approach of I can only take away so many calories from you. Right. So at some point, it's really a conversation of we got to get you moving more. We got to get you more active. We got to actually burn more calories so this whole thing can work. Because like the starvation method is just not sustainable. It's not going to work over time.
It'll be a great fat loss approach. But what happens later? How sustainable is that? Can the average person do that? No. So when you're thinking about how to lose fat, if you look at the energy balance equation, you look at all the parts that you can manipulate. It's not just eat less food. It could be a lot of other things on the other side, specifically the movement. The workouts are great. I think everyone should lift and move and do cardio and stuff like that. Eat protein. Like these are the things. It's not just starve yourself. And that's like where I think the diet culture stuff is coming from, because people for much of their life, if we're talking about struggling eaters, much of their life, they were psychologically dieting. They weren't actually dieting. They were forcing starvation on themselves because things were happening somewhere else in the week that were pumping up those averages. And what I love about what we do is we politely call BS on the story people tell themselves. You know, we go over why this stuff works, why it matters, and what the causes of excess calories, where they're coming from and how they happen in a world where people aren't even aware of it. And that to me is like, that's the golden ticket for everyone to realize where this stuff happens.
Mm-hmm. It's just kind of, grabbing that one little snack here, grabbing that one. People just don't realize how much that adds up over the course of a week, over the course of a month, over the course of 6 months. Like just being aware of that thing happening is so important.
I've had clients tally up how many times they would just randomly reach for things. And I had a seasoned member that was hundreds of weeks into the program working with me. And she tallied it up, and it was like dozens and dozens of moments per day. And she said, holy shit, like I didn't even realize how many times I would grab for something. I said, that's the thing. We have to build the awareness there. Mm-hmm. So how can you design your daily eating around not doing that as much?
Yep. It's actually funny. The conversation that we have with a lot of our clients and athletes and people is very similar. It's just slightly different in the sense that, like in this fat loss realm, we're trying to keep you very self-aware of not having all these moments of continually grabbing and snacking and just blowing your calories up without realizing it. Most of our people are drastically under eating based off of their output. And so we're having to talk to them about consciously being aware of, hey, like make sure you have a snack between like these two meals because you're 1,000 calories under where you need to be just to kind of sustain your baseline and be okay. Right. But the basic principle there is the same, is we need to have that self-awareness built in, like set a thing on your phone, just a reminder. It's going to ping you at 10 a.m. Hey, have a shake and a banana and a tablespoon of almond butter, whatever it is, right? Just that one simple adjustment. I don't have to get more supplements. I don't have to try to like really crazily change how many meals you're eating or how much calorie is within each meal. It could be as simple as, hey, like, let's just have an extra snack between these two meals. And then we're going to be back on the trend line we want to be on.
Yeah, we had someone the other day asking about her son. Her son wanted to gain weight and be more athletic. He was about 19. And I think the advice this individual was hoping for was a little bit more prescriptive. Like, hey, he should do this at this time, do this, and then do that. At 19, like all this kid needs to worry about is work out hard and consistently and eat enough protein and calories. Yeah. And you're probably going to be good. And a lot of that advice to do that easier is kind of the opposite of what we tell a lot of fat loss members. It's like they maybe shouldn't snack as much. Maybe they should delay a meal so they have more food later when they're more susceptible to overeating. But this kid, like, he's just got to pack it in, start to finish in the day. Otherwise, it's like the people that can't lose weight are like, oh, I eat 1,200 calories, but I can't lose. It's almost like the people that aren't gaining. They're like, oh, I eat 3,000, 5,000 plus. When they start tracking, it's like 1,950,
Oh yeah, we get that all the time.
I was that back in the day. I'm like, no, I'm crushing food. It's like, no, man, you ate 2 decently big meals and they were like super clean. So they were like 900 calories.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was definitely in that camp at one point. I'm eating so much food, then you actually run the math on. That's a nice part, right? People lie, math doesn't.
Yeah.
Numbers don't lie.
The body and the results tell the story.
Mm-hmm.
That's it.
Yeah, I mean, if he's anything like I was when I was 19, he just probably needs to be perpetually eating. Because I think back to when I was in college playing baseball and I always was trying to put on a little bit of extra weight. I played probably right around 195 to 200 pounds, and I really wanted to be more 205, 210. And I think back to how I ate, I was just drastically under eating. You got to think about what a day was like at that point. You're walking around campus all day with a backpack going to classes. You probably have
all day.
You're rucking all day. You have a team lift at some point for an hour. And then you probably have a 3+ hour practice if you don't have a game. Like, you're never not active doing things. So it's like, I just should have been perpetually shoveling calories down more or less from the time I woke up to the time I went to bed.
And that's exhausting, man. Trying to eat to sustain performance and build muscle is, personally, I think for me, it's harder to do that than it is to eat for fat loss.
I'm in total agreement. I think that when we start talking about very high level performers, high level training, which will be probably a little bit beyond what we're doing at Rebel, right? Because we're helping busy humans that have a lot of other jobs and priorities and things in their day. It's like, hey, we got 60 to 75 minutes. Let's get in, be efficient, make sure we're getting the most out of this session to help you hit your goals. If you're talking these top 1% in the world athletes, I think that the eating is far more difficult than the training. I actually think the training is the fun part, but having to eat enough food to sustain your training is miserable. Like that's just my 2 cents, my own experiences.
Yeah. It is. It's uncomfortable. Like the biggest, and I'm not even talking like bodybuilder, but like the bigger people I know, like the more muscular people I know, they eat to exhaustion just to sustain that performance and muscle. And it's tough, man. It's why don't you see that many jacked people? Because the effort and time that takes, it is like, to me, it's like one of the most honorable things in fitness. To me, it's harder than someone running a marathon. Mm-hmm. You know, it's crazy to see what needs to be done to build muscle like that.
Yeah, you basically are a professional eater who then just works out a lot. But it's also funny from a evolutionary standpoint when we think about that putting on muscle. The body really doesn't want to carry muscle. It takes an extreme effort for you to convince your body from a physiological standpoint, hey, we should carry around a lot of this really extra expensive, potentially worthless tissue that's going to take tons of calories that you probably don't have access to. You just have to forage all the time. Like muscle from an evolutionary standpoint, you need just enough and then we're good.
I love that topic. Because it's like a lot of people are like, oh, I want to lift, but I don't want to get too big. It's like, listen, your body does not want you to get too big. Don't worry. Like it's going to take some time. But you're right. And I love the way you word it. It's also how I explain it to people sometimes. Muscle is expensive. It takes more calories. It causes more weight on the body. So then your whole system is expending more. So it's good if you want to like have a slightly higher metabolism and burn extra calories, but your body doesn't know we're living in this world. It doesn't know that your human brain wants to just carry muscle because you want to look better or something.
Yeah, you want to look
like
like Chris Hemsworth.
Yeah, man, dude's a monster. What is he, like 6'3", too?
I don't know. He's just like the total package, right? He's a beautiful man. He's jacked. Thor is an awesome character. Like, let's be honest. You ask any human on the planet Earth, and every single one, man or woman, is going to be like, "Oh yeah, Chris Hemsworth is a beautiful person." Like, it just is what it is.
You know what's really funny? I had the other night before we went up to bed, I had one of the Thor movies on as I was feeding the baby, like half paying attention. And Krista walks in, my wife, and I was like, "No, get out! Thor's got his shirt off."
Yeah, well, let's not set that expectation level.
Yeah, I didn't want to expose her to the snacks, you know.
So if we want to circle back on this main idea here that we started the conversation with, this self-awareness, what are some really good places for people to start just working on this on their own? Obviously, this is where the value of a coach comes in, because they're going to be able to be the unbiased third party who calls you on your stuff and helps you realize the things that you just don't realize. But for people listening that want to start being more self-aware of this, whether they are trying to maybe slim down, lean out, lose a little bit of that COVID weight that we had a lot of people put on, or they're the people that are like, hey, I'm trying to put on another 5-10 pounds of muscle, etc. What are some good tactics, strategies for them to start becoming more self-aware in this realm?
Yeah. So first, I think we have to, like, humans are incredibly biased. We don't want to see the reality of things, because sometimes that does make us feel wrong. It does make us feel misled. We have a lot of time, going down a certain route, so we don't want to question it. But I always like to think of when I'm trying to find something out about myself, I try to pan out, and I think, if I wasn't me and I was my friend, what is the advice I would give myself? And for some reason, the advice we usually give ourselves, it's so biased because it impacts our feelings. So if we look at ourselves and we say, what is the advice that my friend would give me? We can start to poke holes in our arguments, which is, I'm hardly eating, but I keep gaining weight. I'm really trying hard, but I'm gaining weight. It's my metabolism. It's this. And if we look at the science, it's typically not a metabolism or health issue. That's like a tiny, tiny percentage of people. It's usually people that just don't know something is happening. So when you pan out and you look at it in an unbiased manner through a clear lens, you can start to see what these little accidents are. And we typically know what they are for most people. It's the snacks, it's the mindless eating, it's the weekend eating, it's the alcohol, it's not tracking or acknowledging healthier foods because they're healthier, but we know that that doesn't supersede caloric content just because it's labeled by someone as a healthier food. So we just have to look at what is actually happening. And when we identify that without this bias viewpoint, we can start thinking about what are these blockades we can put up so it doesn't happen anymore. And it's typically a lot easier than people think, which I think it's really awesome and eye-opening.
So like for me, I'm a pretty hyper analytical person. My wife gives me crap about this all the time, actually. She's like, how do you leave so much emotion off the table on certain decision-making situations? And that's just my training and my background. It's actually something I'm working on. I'm trying to bring more emotion and things to the table. But for what I do, it tends to be really actually a good thing. It's a good skill, right? That Jekyll and Hyde nature. One of the things I tend to try to recommend people to do is, in an attempt to make this process as objective as possible, to leave your just emotions and the lens that you're going to put on things, just get it on paper, right? Track it, write it down. Write down the actual measurable things that are taking place. And then you can just look at it and say, oh, these are the numbers. This is what's staring at me in the face. It's no different than in business, right? In business, I can sit here I can sit here and say, oh man, sales are great. We're converting like crazy. And then you do the math and you're like, oh, we're converting like 0.5%. That's not very good. It's just, I think
that's exactly right. Everywhere in life, we look at data. And there's a saying that I saw on a guy's laptop when I was on a plane. It said, I don't know where it came from, but it said, without data, you're just another person with an opinion. And I was like, oh my God, I'm stealing that. I'm going to tell that to everybody. And for like 4 years, I've been saying it all over the place. And it's the same thing. We look at data everywhere. But when it comes to food and how much we're eating or how we're eating, we want to run from it. And why is that? Is it people don't want to know? Info aversion, right? If we don't track it and we don't know what we weigh, then it's not real. But it is real, because like we said, if the body and the results are going to tell the story of what's actually happening.
It's one of those ignorance is bliss moments, right? Because change is hard. It's really hard. And if you're going to be forced to actually look at the data, this is what the data says, and come to terms with that, I think it's what happens next that really scares people. The concept of having to then make change based off the data you're looking at. Because that's what's hard. We're comfortable in our ways. We have our routines. We have our habits. We have our patterns. And the thought of having to change all of this is scary. It's really imposing.
Yeah, it's intimidating for people because people could have been that person for 10, 20, 30, 40 years. So they think that to get to the next step, they have to be a completely different person. And that's what I always want to tell people. You don't have to be a completely different person, but you do have to identify the behaviors of that person you don't want to be anymore and how to change those things. And it does take the data and the, internal dialogue that says, well, okay, how do I do this? Because for a lot of people, it literally could just be 300 to 500 expendable calories a day. So this first step is, where are those calories coming from and what isn't worth having anymore? Or how can you replace them? How can you spend your caloric money a little wiser? And it's not that difficult once you find it. But I'm finding that our industry is still arguing things that are 7 layers past what we need to do. Like, we still need to get people to buy in on how fat loss works, because the loudest people in the room, and you know who I'm probably talking about, are telling everyone it's still carbs and insulin and you have to fast and do all this. It sounds awesome because it gives people a reason why they are where they are. Oh, I haven't done that. No, it's not that you haven't done that. It's that you've been consuming too much and haven't acknowledged it yet.
Yeah, this ties into, I'm a really big fan of Nassim Taleb's writings, Anti-Fragile, and his whole, I don't remember the name of the 3-book series, but it's really good. And he talks about a concept in there called via negativa, and it's the power of subtraction. Got to use my words here. And he just basically spends a good chunk of the book talking about how we spend lots of times as humans always trying to focus on what do we need to add. He's like, when in reality, the biggest ROI opportunity is usually taking something away, right? He's like, we have this very intervention biased mindset, whereas we are probably better off if we try to figure out what can we just remove from the equation as opposed to trying to add in a whole bunch of stuff on top of it. And that is the case, right? As humans, we tend to figure out what extra things do I need to be doing as opposed to, well, what small things can I just remove?
Yeah, I love that because it is so damn true. It's like we look at like, what am I not doing? What do I have to plug in? It's like, wait, pan back out. What is the thing that you might be doing wrong? And I talk about this like my father-in-law, Bob, it's hilarious. He's like, I don't even eat. I'm like, no, Bob, you consider eating when you sit down. I said, I see you standing up and eating, but for some reason it's not registered, right?
That's my father to a
use
T.
him as an example. Yeah, I use him as an example. I'm like, Bob likes to just stand up and eat, and then he says he didn't eat because eat for some people equals a meal, and a meal equals sitting down with a plate quietly, maybe with your family. And that's not the case. Like the way we eat now, I think there's research now that's showing like 50% of Americans' calories are coming from snacks. Most people aren't sitting down at a kitchen table with a plate of Doritos. People eat out of these packages and their brain just subconsciously doesn't register it as a meal. And that's why when you track it, you're like, oh man, like I have to come to terms with this.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned, I think, a couple of thoughts here. You mentioned the very loud voices on the internet, which we are all aware of. Part of the reason I despise the internet. If I could, I would delete my social media tomorrow. But like you said, it's that balance of that's where I can reach and maybe help people.
Yep.
But yeah, it's just basic physics, right? It's just conservation of mass. If you eat this thing, it doesn't just disappear. Like it's there. And it's the most rudimentary basic physics 101 that everybody probably learned as a freshman in high school. But for some reason, that just doesn't register. And I don't understand it. It blows my mind.
It is kind of weird. And I use an example often. I say a mammal doesn't, or a starving mammal loses weight, right? Like when in nature have you seen a mammal undereat and stay the same weight? You haven't. And the human is the same thing. If we're not overeating, why are we still holding this mass? Mm-hmm. It is that simple, but it's hard to get through to people because people, again, they don't know what's happening. So the story they're telling themselves is actually true to them. And that's a hard thing, is how do you show people who are certain nothing is going wrong that something could possibly be going wrong?
Especially when they don't want to hear it.
Yeah.
Right.
It's hard. And like, I'm a big customer service guy, right? Like StrongerU is like world-class customer service. So it's every time I want to say how this stuff goes, I'm like, oh man, am I going to offend or upset or disrupt our customer service numbers because I need to tell someone the truth? Mm-hmm. And it's all in the delivery, right? Like I used to overlook this stuff. So if you're a coach and you're having trouble, communicating to someone that they might not be doing what they think, knock the pins over and talk about the things that people usually overlook. And most of us at some point in our lives, we probably didn't always track or know what we ate. We used to overlook this stuff. Like I dabbled in the paleo diet. Mm-hmm. I used to fry chicken in coconut oil and think it was healthy. What? I would tell someone I ate healthy. And if I didn't lose fat, someone like us now could be like, dude, do you know how many calories you're taking in? My God, it's tons, right? Mm-hmm. It was like a block of coconut oil. And it cost me like $12 every meal. It's insane.
Uh-huh. It's the other thought I had here, circling back to where we're talking about these more simple, we'll put air quotes. They are simple in conversation on a whiteboard. They are not simple in action. But one of the things we talked about off air was I spent 2.5 years working towards a PhD in integrative physiology, very, very down in the weeds. Studied aging, health, and longevity. And One of the reasons I decided to walk away is that it's not that we don't know what works, right? If you actually dig into the literature and you speak to people whose job and profession is to study this stuff, they're all going to tell you the same thing. If you eat good food and you exercise and you sleep and you're not a stress ball all the time and you have some family, friends, and community, you're going to crush it, right? Outside of some weird genetic abnormality, getting run over by a bus or mauled by a lion, you're going to do amazing. So even in research right now, the question isn't what works, because we know what works. The question is, what drugs and interventions can we create so people don't have to do these things? And I just don't believe in that as a methodology, right? I don't think that we understand human physiology and metabolism to the degree to where we're able to have interventions like that without there being some type of ramification. We just don't, right? You can think of the library analogy. If human physiology was a massive library and there was this one library you could walk into and it contained everything that there was to know about human physiology. So that would be including physics, chemistry, right? You're pretty much omniscient at that point. How many books do we actually currently have from that library? Is it 5%? Is it 15%? I don't know how many it is, but I know it's not 100, and I know we're nowhere near close to 100%. So it's like we have these things that we know work and have worked for thousands of years because that's how nature has created us. And then there's the humans who say, well, we're going to create these things in a lab to try to subvert what nature has created. And these always come with complications because we don't know how the interactions are going to play out at the second, third, fourth, fifth level.
And you nailed it. The big thing is like, what are the big rocks? It's like how much someone eats, what the food is, what is their fitness, what is their sleep, stress, hydration, community. These are the problems that people face. That it's like what has to happen for someone to lose fat is they need to eat a different way, right? But what supports them eating a different way? Their lifestyle. So it's, again, we can spend 20 more years trying to study the perfect methodology or internal mechanism that does X, Y, and Z. But why waste that time? Why don't we develop systems for humans to follow the things that we know work? Mm-hmm. Like, who in nutrition coaching is having or helping people have conversations with their partners? Because that's an effect on the food they eat. These are the things coaches need to be doing these days, not just talking the nerd stuff, right? Mm-hmm. You got to talk about the human stuff. And I think that's a big missing piece in the industry, and why when we started StrongerU, I'm like, we gotta touch on that thing, because it's not people not knowing what to do. Obviously, there's a lot of people that don't, but even when people know exactly what to do, they still don't do it. So there's a problem. How do we fix that?
Yeah, the problem is not information. I think that if I were to go pull 100 random people off the street and poll them on, hey, how do you think you should be eating? I would bet most of what I own that the vast majority of those people are going to get me in the ballpark, right? They're not going to crush it and be 100% correct, but I guarantee they're going to be in the ballpark. Well, I should probably drink less soda and eat more chips and have less fast food and cook more of my own food and, probably just eat a little less food in general. It's not an information-based problem. It's a human behavioral action-based problem. And that problem exists whether or not you're trying to lose weight or whether or not you're trying to gain weight.
And there's a time where you meet someone who wants two different things. They want to be fit and healthy, but they also want to do all those other things that cause them to not be fit and healthy. So how do you level with those people? Mm-hmm. Do you tell them you want to jump in the pool, but you want to stay dry? You can't. There's no wetsuit in this world. Like, what are you going to do? Where's that balance? And I think a big part of the scare for these people is they think it's going to be harder than it is, right? They think, going back a few minutes, they think that they have to change their entire life. And that's not it. When we look at this stuff on a spectrum, on one end, you have the person that just wants to crush chicken breast and lift weights all day. On the other end, you have someone that just wants to eat chips and sit on a couch. No one has to be on either of those spectrums. You can be somewhere in the middle, and that is the balance that everyone personally, and they can only be the ones that figure out where that is. Coaches can guide, but people have to accept, like, where do I want to be on this spectrum? Mm-hmm. Because the balance of where you should be in terms of weight. Maybe it's a balance of what's healthy, what's realistic, and what you're satisfied with based on your entire lifestyle.
Mm-hmm. One question I do have here, I'd be intrigued to know how you guys like to approach this as Stronger You, is we've mentioned how important when we're talking about making these nutrition based habit changes, changing the way people eat, helping people be better eaters, their significant others, their partners, their loved ones, and their friend group are all going to have an enormous impact on that environment in which these people are trying to eat. That can be really hard to navigate, like having that conversation with a significant other, or like being surrounded by 6 of your best friends who don't really care about this anymore, and they just want to pound beer and eat chips and nachos and like do all this stuff. Like that's where this gets really hard, right? Like, how do you even begin to broach that conversation with somebody of like, well, I don't want you to leave your friend group because that would be worse than that's a terrible alternative. But how can you begin having conversations with your friends to get them on board to support you and the changes that you want to make?
I think a big part of this is asking for it. I think a lot of people, I don't know, they like show up to dinners and then everyone's ordering stuff and they almost resent their friends because the friend might not care about their particular diet. So it's like you just have to talk to them about it. And when a friend or a partner is encouraging you to do the opposite of what you want to do to become healthier, you can't take that personal because it's not them judging your decision. It's them hoping that life doesn't change for the whole group or the whole party. And that's the hardest thing for people is having difficult conversations. Like, think about that, right? Like a husband and wife go out to eat every Friday and they always got Mexican food and there's queso and chips and burritos and margaritas. When you say to the husband, hey, do you think we can go somewhere different so I can get a healthier meal? And he looks at it as, now you're taking something from me. You have to, like, there's that balance, right? It's maybe not just ripping it all away at once. Maybe it's creating these similar foods at home in a healthier way. So I think it all starts with the conversation. And that is often the missing piece, because a lot of people, they don't think it's other people's problem. But when you're just call it a diet, a lot of people around you are kind of on that diet as well. Mm-hmm. But it's just the conversation. It's like, hey, this is important to me. You know, I love you. I want this to work for both of us. Can you help me in this journey? And a lot of times, like, people are pleasantly surprised. And other times, without sounding like marriage counselor, you could realize you're with the wrong person. If they are completely in disagreement with what you want to do for yourself, you have to have an even more difficult conversation about that.
Yeah, that's where you maybe have to start realizing, have you surrounded yourself with the right types of people? Because I think when you are surrounded by the right people, you almost don't even have to, you don't really need to even ask for it, right? You just tell people, hey, this is what I want to do. And they immediately jump in to support you. Hey, this is fantastic. It's awesome. What can we do to help? How can I help hold you accountable? The best friends I've ever had, and then the best friend networks I've seen, like, that's the mentality. That's the attitude, regardless. Like they will proactively call you out if you're not doing the thing that you committed to them that you're going to do. Right.
Yep.
And I think
it's sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say another piece in this too is, I think what can get hard sometimes is that your significant other or your friends feel resistance because they feel like they're going to be getting left behind, right? It's like you're doing the thing that they're afraid to do. You're making progress. You're moving forward. And so they're just going to desperately try to hold you and pull you back down to wherever their level is, right? Like, how dare you go and make yourself better? You just stay down here with me.
And we see that, right? I mean, you see it when, I don't know, a celebrity who may be a little heavier loses some weight, and then they get like this Twitter backlash because they left the club. They're no longer representative of that group, and they get weird and resentful. And there's part of this thing, it's like the crabs in the bucket. Like, you're not climbing out. I'm going to pull you right back in. That's like the most messed up thing you can do. Why is that saying so true, where everyone wants to see you do well, but never better than them? Mm-hmm. Like, we all need to just be a little bit more supportive. Someone that wants to be healthier when you don't is okay. They're not judging you. They just want to help themselves. and they're going to need your help as the friend or the family member. And you can't ignore that.
I think that's where that community component of this coaching becomes so important. I know that's something that you guys really prioritize as StrongerU, is getting that community strong, because that way at least members have that to fall back on. They have that to lean on. They have that support group there to help them. I feel like that is such another just big component that people miss out on, is having a group of people on a similar journey to you. And you have this environment where a rising tide is going to help raise all ships.
Yeah, dude, I love it. I'm like, that's like my big business advice, right? Like, have a community so your people can like hang and chill and learn from each other, because you don't know what's out in the real world for them. They might not have that support. Maybe they only have one or two people in their entire network that supports what they want to do. Mm-hmm. But at StrongerU, there's tens of thousands of people that can say, hey, I've been there. I've done that. You got this. Here's what you need to do. And it is, as you know, people like rag on social media, and I've been guilty of it myself, but there are real connections on social media. Some of the most important people in my life I met on a news feed. Like, that's crazy, but that's real. That's the world we're in. And people shouldn't ignore that, because most dieting journeys or fitness journeys are extremely lonely. And that's one of the missing pieces. When I think of all these diets that don't work, part of it is because there is no community. They're lonely. Yeah, that book at Barnes & Noble might work if you do it, but when you shut the pages and you don't follow the advice, there's no one there to help you. And that's why they're never, like, when people are like, are you afraid this app is going to replace you, or this book? And I'm like, no, because these books don't provide what the human coaching does. And that's what people need in that community.
For sure. Mike, I've loved it. This has been a fantastic conversation. Let's wrap this up with just two more little bits. I think the first one that would be good is, for someone that's listened to this, what is the one really big thing you want them to walk away from to go actually take into the world with them if they listen to this episode? What should like their one big takeaway be?
I would just say, like, honestly, track food for a few weeks. Like, as annoying as it may sound, when you download an app like MyFitnessPal, Chronometer, Lose It, whatever, and you start planning your day ahead of time, keeping the food simple, which when I say simple, I mean not these crazy recipes and casseroles and chilies and stuff like that, you could honestly see what's always been happening. And when you learn what is happening, you can identify the things to change. So as annoying as it sounds, as frustrating as, you know, me telling people to just go track your food and track it accurately, even weekends for a little while, you're going to see what has been going wrong and you're going to know what to do. So I know a lot of people think they're tracking, but I would challenge them, and this is going to sound a little extreme, but if you're not seeing results and you're certain that you're doing what you're supposed to, how much of a bet would you place on that? Would you bet your life? Would you bet $1,000? Would you bet $1 million? Would you bet your home? And when you give people those caveats, they say, oh, you know what? I probably haven't done what I think I've been saying I'm doing. So always address that. Always look internal. And that's how you get results. That's how you change, when you acknowledge something needs to be changed.
I love that, man. And then for people listening that want to find out more about you or StrongerU, where's the best place for them to go to make that happen?
My personal social is at Mike Doehla, and I'm sure you'll have it spelled, so that's cool. I wish there was less letters in the name because there's a lot of waste in there. And then StrongerU at StrongerU or StrongerU.com.
Beautiful. Perfect. Mike, thank you so much for coming on, man. This was fantastic. I really enjoyed it. Everybody listening, hope that you guys got a lot out of this as well. Be sure to go throw Mike a follow, check out StrongerU. We've done a lot of kind of crosswork with them in the past, having clients carry over, and they do such an awesome job in this nutrition realm. Guys are always the first recommendation for us when we have people like, hey, we need a little bit more in this nutrition coaching than what we currently have.
I appreciate that. Thank you for having me, James. This has been awesome.
All right, everybody, have a fantastic week, and we'll be back next Monday.